KPFK Rebel Alliance News, Los Angeles.
Author and founder of the Center for Political Innovation, Caleb Maupin, was present at the opening trial of the Uhuru Three, who were arrested in the Tampa Bay area for supposedly being foreign lobbyists for Russia after facilities of the Black Socialist Party had been raided. Maupin also discussed the 1938 Foreign Agents Registration Act that has been used to indict them. KPFK contributing journalist Dan Nauman has the story.
Hello, this is Dan Nauman, KPFK's Rebel Alliance News, and I'm with Caleb Maupin, who is the founder of the Center for Political Innovation. Just recently, at you could say the first trial, the Uhuru 3 in the Tampa Bay area. For those of you who are listening may not know what that is, Caleb, what is the Uhuru trial all about?
Well, there's an organization that's been around since the 1970s called the African People's Socialist Party. People commonly refer to them as the Uhuru Movement. And in St. Petersburg, Florida, and in St. Louis, Missouri, they run two big community centers, and they run a lot of projects in the Black community. They trace their lineage back to the Black Panthers and Huey Newton. And 2 years ago, they were raided by the FBI. Their homes were raided, their facilities were raided. And it was alleged that they were a front for Russian intelligence, that they were spreading Russian meddling. And they have now been indicted as foreign agents, alleging that they are agents of the Russian government. And if they are convicted, they could face 15 years in prison. It's the leader, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, as well as Jesse Neville and Penny Hess. And they are on trial. And the trial began on Tuesday morning. It's expected to go on for a month in the Tampa Bay Area District Federal Court.
And what I understand, and a lot of what they do in the community is actually to be more self-sufficient. They have they developed community centers, farmers markets, educational classes for people in the community with various needs. So they're kind of doing their own thing, right? Arrested for being a Russian asset because you go to Russia. Can you clarify that?
Well, they went to Russia once in 2015 for a conference called the Anti-Globalization Conference, where they met, the man who put the conference on, a guy named Alexander Ionov. And he is alleged, according to the indictment, the government indictment against them is very weak in, they contest the information in it. But even if you read the indictment itself, it doesn't really make a very effective case that they are agents of the Russian government. It alleges they got $7,000 over the course of 5 years, which is really a drop in the bucket because of all the community work that they do, the farmers markets, the bake sales, the prisoner reentry programs, the classes for pregnant mothers. I mean, they have a huge operation, a huge amount of ventures and community programs that they do. $7,000 is just a drop in the bucket. I mean, it wouldn't make a difference. The government is going to bring witnesses against them. Almost all the witnesses are FBI agents of one variety or other. They are going to mount a defense. Now, they read off the names of their defense witnesses. Among them are Aaron Mate of the Gray Zone, who will be testifying in their defense as an expert witness, and the academic scholar Robin D.G. Kelly, who's an expert on the history of Black liberation movements and government repression of them and demonization of them. And they have a number of witnesses lined up to testify that they are not in violation of the Foreign Agents Registration Act, even according to the government its own indictment, even if every word of it were true, which they maintain they can prove is not the case. But even if it were true, that would not amount to violation of the Foreign Agents Registration Act. The Foreign Agents Registration Act is a very obscure law passed in 1938 that was intended to kind of enable the U.S. government to restrict and monitor. At the time, it was aimed at Nazi Germany, right? The agents of Nazi Germany who might be lobbying government officials or whatever. But generally, they tell FBI agents in their training, don't worry about it. We don't enforce this law. And I believe until Trump was elected in 2016, it had only been enforced 7 times in all of U.S. history. It's a very obscure law. Generally, the only way it's been used is that when the government deems somebody to be in violation of it, to be an unregistered foreign lobbyist, they are told by the Department of Justice to register. They have 30 days to register, and so they register. Very, very rarely have people have been prosecuted around it until recently. My employers at RT were forced to register under the Foreign Agents Registration Act, even though the law has a specific exception for the media written into it. We were forced to register. And now, the Biden administration is indicting everyone it can. They've indicted somebody who worked for Governor Cuomo, claiming that she was lobbying for China. They indicted Sumi Terry, the top South Korea scholar, alleging that she's an agent of South Korea because South Korea won't escalate against North Korea as the USA is asking. They raided the home of Scott Ritter under the Foreign Agents Registration Act, investigating if his work with RT would be considered being a foreign agent. But this particular law that they're indicting the Uhuru movement with, the Foreign Agents Registration Act, is a particularly vague law. And this is really a test case because they want to see if they can actually convince a jury that, that they're, having some rallies about Ukraine or whatever constituted acting as foreign agents. Now, the prosecution tried to block First Amendment arguments and say that First Amendment arguments shouldn't be admitted, but the judge denied that. He said, no, First Amendment arguments are certainly admitted. And when I was in the courtroom, it seemed that the judge was, to some degree or other, making the point that, they're not accused of espionage, they're not accused of violence, they're not accused of being spies or anything like that. They're accused of lobbying on behalf of a foreign government and doing so without informing the attorney general, as is required under this obscure law, and that the government has to somehow make the case that them doing all these things that they probably would have done anyway, protesting U.S. foreign policy, running their farmers markets, running for office, talking about reparations for African Americans, that somehow doing that was not something that they genuinely wanted to do, not something they believed in their heart, but something they did on orders from the Kremlin. Now, I don't know how the government is going to manage to prove that, because that's going to be a very, very difficult thing to prove. But we also know that federal courts are very, very much biased in favor of the prosecution, right? And that, that very rarely do you get acquittals in federal court. So, we shall see how this case plays out. But it is a very, very frightening case. There's many examples in American history of Black revolutionary activists being framed up for crimes they didn't commit. But this is a situation where there is no crime. They're just accused of doing their Black activism, and they're declaring that activism makes them foreign lobbyists, foreign agents. And if this case goes through, at that point, they could bring charges against anyone, right? If you speak up about U.S. foreign policy and they can somehow link you to somebody in some other country, then they've got you. I mean, that's a ridiculous precedent to set. I know a lot of people that are constantly having an argument in their head with people on the internet over their particular niche issue, and they kind of forget the bigger picture. And that at the end of the day, this is about the bigger picture. And that's why Tucker Carlson has spoken up in support of the Uhuru 3. That's why Joe Rogan talked about it on his podcast. I'll obviously be covering the United Nations General Assembly and other things. Jill Stein was there on the opening of the trial. Charles Barron, the former member of the the New York City Council, he was there. I hope that there is a not guilty verdict from the jury. The jury says, no, this is about free speech. They didn't do anything that the Constitution doesn't allow them to do. And the jury just throws this right back.
Thank you very much, Caleb, for taking the time today. And for KPFK's Rebel Alliance News, this is Dan Nowman.
Rebel Alliance News.
Moscow's calling. Moscow's calling.
I'm waiting on the line.